Welcome to the Oncology Voice Network Podcast, connecting the voices that move oncology drug development forward.
Welcome to the Oncology Voice Network Podcast. I'm Dr. Kirk Shepard. This show brings the real-world voices of oncology drug development to life. Leaders, innovators, patients, and partners who are shaping the future of cancer care. Today, we're turning our attention to one of the most powerful forces in oncology, the leaders who bring humanity, courage, and personal conviction to the work of transforming cancer care. In a field defined by scientific complexity and rapid innovation, progress is not only shaped by data and development, but by the people who carry the mission forward with a purpose. Our guests today embody that mission in an extraordinary way. Christi Shaw and Shelley Shaw are the co-founders of the More Moments, More Memories Foundation, inspired by their late mother, their sister Shelley, and their own decades of leadership across the pharmaceutical industry. They have lived the realities of cancer as executives, as caregivers, and as family members fighting for more options and more time. In today's conversation, we'll explore their journeys, their advocacy, and their shared vision for a more connected and compassionate oncology community. Christi and Shelley, welcome to Oncology Voice Network, or the OVN podcast. Wonderful to have both of you, the Shaw sisters, on at the same time to discuss your careers and passions and your involvement as authors in the book, Voices of Oncology. Christi as author and voice of the CEO chapter, and Shelley as one of the authors and voices of the commercial chapter. And now we appreciate the fact that you're carrying these messages forward from the book by participating in the podcasts of OVN. Christi and Shelley, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kirk. Great to be here. Thanks for having us, Kirk.
Both of you have been very successful and have highly inspirational stories about your dedication to patients, cancer care, and drug development. We would love to hear about your individual career journeys. How did you get here? What were the pivotal experiences that shaped the paths each of you took into oncology leadership?
So interestingly, I'd say what didn't drive me into oncology for the first 20 years of my career was the fact our mom died of breast cancer in 1996. And at that time, it was even before the aromatase inhibitors were approved. So whatever therapy she received tended to have harsh side effects, quality of life issues, and she ended up succumbing to her breast cancer at age 51. And so for me, I thought, I don't want to work in cancer. I don't want to work in oncology because it's too painful. I want to bring therapies to the world that are actually going to extend lives and improve quality of life. And then one day on a Saturday morning, I'd just gotten back from a trip and I had a couple of voicemails and I agreed to meet with what would be my boss at Novartis. We met at a hotel on a Saturday morning. I had a 2-year-old. I thought, what am I doing? I don't want to go to this interview. I don't want to go to this discussion. I'm not interested in oncology. But he basically took out a piece of paper and a pencil and drew a rocket ship going to the moon. And he told me the story of Gleevec. Here we had a therapy, is a pill that you take once a day for chronic myeloid leukemia. And almost everybody dies of something else. They take this pill the rest of their life, and it was a miracle. And so it started to reopen my eyes to oncology to say, wow, here's an area where we can make, the advances have happened so much that maybe I would like this. And 3 weeks later, I was working at Novartis leading North America Oncology.
And you were a part of one of the best oncology drugs ever developed with Gleevec. I mean, that was a miracle drug. So what a great start.
I was very fortunate, yes.
Shelley, what about you as far as your path, how you got into oncology leadership?
After losing our mother and then a couple decades later losing our sister, I could really appreciate how much more time mattered to not just the patient, but the family and friends. So as an example, our mom died just a few months before my college graduation. One of her goals was to make it to my graduation. And unfortunately, she didn't. And then
that was on Mother's Day.
Yes, my graduation was on Mother's Day, and my mom unfortunately wasn't with us. And then our oldest sister was able to have the chance to meet her first 2 grandchildren before she had passed. She was at my wedding and walked me down the aisle and actually felt great that day. So I could appreciate, even if it was a matter of months, how meaningful that is. And I really wanted to get into oncology, but there are some leaders who believe that you must have oncology experience to be in, for example, management of oncology marketing. But there's others who believe if you've got the passion, you can do it. And luckily, somebody took a chance on me, and I shared that, hey, it would be my first role in oncology. However, I have a lot of launch experience, which is needed and applies here. And I bring the patient and caregiver experience, which is also very important to these medications that we provide for patients. So I then moved into oncology and haven't looked back, and that's where my passion is. So unfortunately, we weren't able to do more for our mom and sister. We did get extra time with our sister based on learnings that we had that we didn't have with our mom, like getting her into a clinical trial. But we want to really help other families who are in a similar situation that we faced so that they can have more moments and more memories.
Thank you for mentioning the fact that not everybody in oncology, drug development or commercial, whatever, has to be an oncology trained person, because I think some of the best leaders I've seen have not been from oncology. I mean, there's a high percentage, of course, who are, but I think it's very important for people to realize, as you said, if you have the passion and you care, you're going to be successful. I'd now like to go to the fact that you both co-founded More Moments, More Memories Foundation. And I think we already have a feeling of what inspired you to create it. And how has the family's experience with cancer influenced the foundation's mission and purpose? And tell us about the foundation, please.
The concept started when our sister was still alive. She actually received cell therapy at UPenn, and I was the first caretaker. We both ended up being caretakers for Sherry. I was the first one. I had known about cell therapy, working at Novartis and working with Carl June at UPenn. Sherry was able to get into a phase 1B clinical trial. And while we were there, we stayed at Cancer Hope Lodge. You have to be there for 2 months. You have to have a caregiver. So it requires you to have the means for food, lodging, travel, all of those things. And we noticed that the other patients that were staying at Cancer Hope Lodge were from more from the local area. And we thought that was interesting. We said, why are we the only ones out of state? And learning that if you don't have the financial means, you might not be able to get a therapy to save your life. And so based on that, Shelley and I and Sherry put our heads together and said, okay, what are we going to do about this? And it was a way for Shelley and I to continue to give back after Sherry passed away. Shelley and I co-founded it. Sherry gave input as a patient herself, and it's continued since. So our foundation, based on financial need, any kind of cancer, if a patient needs access to a clinical trial, we help provide travel, food, and meals for that patient and their caregiver.
And what we found through this experience, we've been able to not only help people who have limited financial opportunities to join clinical trials, but we've been able to serve an audience that's typically underserved. And what I mean by that is around half of our patients or more actually are non-Caucasian patients joining these clinical trials as a result.
Yeah, they're actually Black and Hispanic specifically. And so now we have a lot of interest trying to help clinical trial recruitment for pharma, that it's a win-win. You help patients potentially help improve, save lives, or like Shelley said, get more time, more moments for lasting memories. And, biopharma can actually recruit more diverse patients.
Well, this is a wonderful mission. And you probably know that at one time, 15% of patients are involved in clinical trials, and that's way so low to the way it should be. And a lot of it is not because they don't want to be, because you mentioned right now, it's the practicalities of life. I mean, paying for it, of course, insurance a lot of times pays for that, but it's the other stuff too. As you mentioned, the transportation back and forth to treatment, where do you stay? I mean, these are major obstacles for a lot of patients. So I'm so happy to see you doing something like that.
And actually having to give up their own jobs to go get treatment, or their caregiver has to give up their job, and then who's paying the bills?
Congratulations to you both.
There's so much more need out there than we can provide. So thank you to everyone who has, participated, donated in some way, and we really appreciate all your help.
Let's move to the book now, Voices of Oncology. You each contributed a chapter to Voices of Oncology. What motivated you to participate and share your perspectives?
So, Kirk, I had the opportunity to work with you and Ramin. We work so closely together. I really understood the need to work closely with medical. And medical, you and Ramin were really good about understanding what we did on the commercial side and how important it was to really partner. Now, you would have thought that was the norm, but we kind of set the standard back then because with all these different rules of medical can do this, but not this, there were walls when you looked at other brands and at other companies. And so I felt it was really important to share that don't be afraid to work together, encourage it, because if you don't work together, we're not going to find these innovative treatments. We're not going to identify early on obstacles that we can overcome. And so that was my motivation to join and tell the story and how people need to really partner and collaborate from the very beginning, from discovery phase of an asset to launch and beyond as the product gets multiple indications and you shape that all the way till LOE, making sure that medical and commercial and all the other cross-functional partners are working together as one unit.
And we even got a little corny, I remember. We have silo busters hats, break down the silos. And that's what was wonderful about having you and Ramin and others who really believed in this, but nobody was really trying to do it at that time. And some people even thought maybe it was inappropriate. They have, commercial and R&D and medical should not be that close together. We know now that's a mistake. But we really appreciated having you as a partner at the time. Well, then what are the important messages that both of you hope to convey to leaders across the whole oncology ecosystem through your chapters?
So for me, similar to what you were just saying, is that teamwork is so important. People who've never worked in oncology, and many leaders who've never worked that work in other disease states will say, oncology is no different than anything else. I don't know why, everybody thinks you need to treat it differently, but it is different all the way from, the patient journey, because we're talking about typically life and death, the risk taking, what regulators will allow and not allow. It tends to be broader, being able to get medicine and therapies on the market quicker and do confirmatory studies versus in a chronic disease. The studies are for a long time and they're phase 3, full and robust. On oncology, everything is different. So as you look at that, you have to be, and everybody says they're patient focused, but I like to tell my team, but are you action oriented focused for the patient? Do you talk about the patient or do you actually do things for the patient? And so this teamwork piece is, you can't have silos between each of the functions because you can't move fast. So I like to tell, for example, medical affairs, you are part of the commercialization teams. You are not commercial, but you're part of the commercialization team because patients cannot get access unless you not only educate the physician on our data, but you actually know the patient journey and who would be the right patient to get it, and that you actually care that the right patient gets the right therapy, and that is part of your job. From a medical perspective. And then at the same time, commercial, we don't show sales at any of my town halls. We looked at volume. How many patients did we treat? Not how many dollars did we rake in? And so from a commercial perspective, we also, top down, need to start focusing on patients, not dollars and incentives and those kinds of things. And then as you look at the whole area, even some of the functions, I'll give you an example with regulatory. We had a regulatory person that was never in oncology before, submitted one of our lymphoma trials to the FDA. And I was a CEO against my wishes. They basically submitted it with the indication we had studied, third line plus. But if you actually followed the patient journey, you would learn very quickly that not very many patients made it to third line, that a lot of patients died between second and third line, I should say. And so I said, no, we're pulling the briefing book back. We're going to rewrite it and submit for third line plus, or second line plus, not third line, second line. So we did that. And of course, the regulators said, did you guys make an error or mistake in this? But the medical team put together the whole story of what happens with a patient if we don't get the study approved in second line and how many patients will be lost. And so the FDA gave us the approval, and we did a confirmatory study. So there's a perfect example of, in oncology, there's the rules, but when you put the patient at the center of it all, everybody, every function, including the regulators, including physicians, we can all actually help patients more if we do it together.
And that was a message we got solidly from the book. Everybody was talking about working together. And also, it can't happen early enough. So that even in the beginning, when we formed the table of contents, we thought, well, we'll put it in the order that, people come into drug development. It was impossible because everybody said, we want to be first. We want to be up there with everybody else with R&D, which to me is something we did. So that's why we made the table of contents alphabetical order. So it has nothing to do with the order that's coming in.
Didn't realize that.
Me neither.
Yes. Yeah. True confession. So because we can see it right now, people saying, oh, well, why is that group ahead of us? We really come at the same time or before. So we eventually worked that out. Christi, maybe it was your experience that has prompted the FDA in the last year and a half or so to try and move these trials, control trials, to early stages, because they realize by the time you get to the later stages, particularly in oncology, the patients are not in good shape many times and not able to show what truly the drug can do. So it's exciting times. I mean, that's really important for oncology. Across your combined experience now in breaking down silos, where do you think the greatest challenges and opportunities across oncology drug development are?
So I think what we're talking about right now, the cross collaboration. So we focused a lot talking about medical and marketing, but there's all these other cross-functional partners, right? And I think in the past, the cross-functional partners have kind of sat at the table and waited for something they need to review. For example, if it's legal or E&C or a question that they needed to answer. But now the way we work is having every cross-functional partner work as one team. So not just medical and marketing, but every function, from our corporate communications to legal, ethics and compliance, someone from sales sitting at the table, our analysts, the team who is responsible, it's a different name at each company, but the team responsible for your forecasting and your market research. So everyone is together at the table with a voice, but they're very, very engaged and really centered around the patients and thinking through everything, really having that knowledge about the patient and the patient journey and the unmet needs, really understanding the market landscape so that they're not just answering questions or giving input for their specific area, but they have a bigger and broader understanding and give input regardless if it's related to their function or not, so that you've got all these cross-functional partners feeling that they're all a big, important part of the brand as they are, and not just this kind of subgroup giving input as needed.
And to add to that, I think beyond the internal focus is really understanding the external landscape. Just as we want to focus on the patient internally, really getting the key stakeholders externally to focus on the patient. So, everybody comes at the patient in a different way, whether you're the physician or you're the insurer or you're the biopharma industry or you're the regulator. And unfortunately, the poor patient is stuck in the middle of all of us. And Shelley and I got to see that firsthand with our sister, that just when she was at her weakest was when she was having to fill out paperwork, and where the pharmacy would change her blue pill to a pink pill, and she's taking 15 pills 4 times a day. And the anxiety that goes with, did I get the wrong one? Is this the right one? And the insurance saying, I didn't get the fax from the doctor's office, who uses fax anymore. But that's, and just piles of paperwork. And it's just astronomical. And then, to the physician's office about where are the incentives. You look at cell therapy, which cures 40% of patients now with a one-time treatment in 40% of the time, and only 1 out of 10 eligible patients are getting it. Why is that? We don't actually reward curing a patient. The reward is in continuing to give therapy. And so that whole external landscape of understanding that and enabling it. When I first got to Kite, everybody thought, and I would have thought it too, by the way, they didn't do anything wrong, but you thought, we have a cure for cancer. Everybody's going to get it. We won't need much of a commercial engine. Well, it turns out they didn't get it. And that commercialization piece is so important. And it's part of everybody's job, whether you're in clinical development or regulatory or compliance. Compliance is another, it's not just black or white. It's gray, and we have to help sculpt that. I like to say, for legal and compliance, who I love my legal and compliance partners, you can hire somebody externally to tell you yes or no. It takes somebody who really understands the business, understands the patient, and really cares about that can help you understand how you can do things to make sure the patients get what they need.
And that's so important. I used to tell my people, compliance should be your best friend. They should be at many business meetings you can include them, and they wanted to be, so they understand what you're doing around the year instead of coming to them at the end of the year and say, well, what can we do in this situation? Well, if they understand what you're trying to do, where you're going, you don't get just the yes or no answer. You get, well, it depends on this and it depends on that, as far as taking an intelligent path forward. So I'm really glad you mentioned that as far as compliance. And they are one of our voices, as you know, as far as compliance in the book. I'd like to maybe go to your personal experiences. And I like the way when you both talked about breaking down the silos, you brought in now the external world. It's not just about the drug company itself. It's about the academic medical people. It's about the patients, which you already mentioned, and patient advocacy too, both inside and outside. Could you talk a little bit about that as far as the patient, and then maybe bring into, are we approaching the families of the patient enough? Do we care for them enough?
So in addition to the patient, we also have more impact when we're partnering with the doctors. So it's not we and they, or it's not just they're our customers. They can be our partners, and they bring ideas based on what they're seeing with their patient. So if there's an unmet need that the doctor sees that maybe we don't see, or if he's seeing potential new use for the product based on some responses. So I think a big part of it is really partnering close with the doctors because they're seeing these patients every day. So that's one big piece. And then when it comes to the patient, of course, we need to work closely with the patient advocacy groups, which we do. But there's some cancers where it's such a bleak diagnosis that they're not thinking about joining an advocacy group. They're just thinking about, how do I get more time? And so then it becomes a challenge of, how do you get to them at the right points? And so often, as we know from our experience, it's a caregiver who's going online to search for information. So are you accessible if somebody Googles a certain diagnosis or a treatment that their doctor talked to them about? Are you making it easy for them to find the information that they need at the right time?
Yeah, Sherry, I think, was on like 17 different trials during her treatments, and so giving of herself to be able to do all of that from all various types of trials. One of the things that Shelley and I learned too is, as we started this foundation and we tried to say, can we help just one patient? Can we just now help just one patient a month? Can we now just help a one patient a week? And we kept increasing our goals. And then we got to the point where, as we looked at all of the other advocacy groups, one of the things, well, we don't want to compete with advocacy groups. We all want to work together, but sometimes it's like there's a competition. So one of the things that Shelley and I did, actually 3 years ago, we're now at the American Society of Hematology. 3 years ago today, we actually started conversations to join Family Reach. So now our More Moments, More Memories is a clinical trial access program within Family Reach. So we didn't start to hire a bunch of employees and change what we were doing. We used an existing model with existing people and said, we'll fund our donors and our work will go towards the clinical trial access part of Family Reach. And Family Reach focuses on approved therapies and needs of financial needs of patients. And they've taught us a lot. So I talked about travel, meals, and food, but they actually see the patient, to your point, every day, talking to the patient, seeing their needs. They actually do other things, like they'll pay for a mortgage for a month, or they'll pay for gas for a month. Other things that with compliance and legal support, what are the things, not just what we think they need, but we need to listen to what they tell us they need.
Wonderful. Well, I'm glad to see you guys are so much in touch with the patient and the family. I mean, that's something that can't be done enough. And I love your tone of helping one patient at a time. It may not be mass numbers, but you're helping importantly, a few patients, and hopefully that'll grow in the future too.
Well, that's one of the stories, when you say that, I'm reminded of a couple of times that happened in my career where, my team said, Christi, there's a shortage of chemotherapy, so sales are going to be down. And I said, no, it's not sales. I said, all I can see right now is my sister laying in bed waiting for her cells to return to potentially save her life. And she can't get them because she can't get the preconditioning regimen. So no, how are we getting chemotherapy? And they said, well, it's not our drug. It's not ours. It's other companies. I'm like, no, it is our problem. It's our problem because that's our patient and that they have a problem. And we're not going to tell that patient lying in that bed, no. And so we set up a team. 3 days later, we had options. Well, clinical development, we can get it, chemo through Canada. Spoke to the FDA, we can get chemotherapy through Europe. We're in one of the top 10 medical conditions. When Trump had to down the planes during COVID, how do we get on one of the top 10 medical treatments to get, cells? And we flew jets in Europe to get cells to patients and never lost a patient. So that's patient focus. You do it because you love it. And guess what? When you do things that are good, all of a sudden things get better for the company. The company became, instead of not profitable, was profitable within 2 years just because we help more patients. You help more patients, you do the right things, you spend the money to help patients, and your company will be successful.
Well, from a CEO perspective, what does true organizational alignment look like when your mission is to cure cancer? This isn't just one or two people. You're trying to align your whole company at all levels on a mission that's very important. How does that happen? And how did that happen for you with Kite?
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? You usually spend a lot of time when you're heading a function or you're heading an organization. Okay, what's our strategy? What's our mission? Let's take a few days, work this out, get input. There was no working it out. Our goal is to cure cancer. So let's get at it one patient at a time. What are we doing? And so you can almost say my job was a little bit easier because the alignment was just there. So many people, almost everybody's been touched by cancer in some way or another, whether it's a friend or a relative or themselves. So people can get that empathy very fast. It doesn't take long stories, but it's a reminder. Every decision that you make in our executive teams, in our building, it's always what would the patient think? It's always, patients are watching. We had pictures, including my sister, of patients on our board wall when I was working at Novartis. And so making sure it's front and center and that you just don't talk about it in a press release or you talk about it on your company website, but you're actually talking about it every day. And every moment reminding people, why are we here? And then all of a sudden, there's a lot less fighting, a lot less competition because you're all focused externally. You're not focused on yourself and internal, bureaucracy.
And Shelley, from a commercial perspective now, what do teams often overlook when they're preparing for and executing a successful oncology launch? In other words, why do launches succeed and a lot of them stumble?
So one way of linking it all together with the cross-functional team really working well together and focusing on the patient, something we've done on my team is it's called A Day in the Life, where you really get to know a patient's journey because you are that patient. So it's something you can do at home or in the office, but you get this kit and then you have this cancer diagnosis. You go through the experience of picking up the phone, talking to the doctor, you're waiting for results. You're told that you have cancer, and then you're asked to come to the doctor's office. And it's so real the way that this is played out that you actually feel like you're going through the emotions of that patient. And in the kit, they give you different tools where you're tracking your medicine with the diary, for example, writing things down that the doctor's going to ask you about when you go to your next appointment. And not only do we do that for your commercial medical people, but everyone, manufacturing folks, so they understand the patient journey. And this really helped make sure that every function on the team could understand what it's like to have that particular cancer and what are the challenges day by day, hour by hour, even that the patient can face. And so that's a great way to make sure everyone can really empathize with the patient. I think what's really important is everyone understanding that patient journey. What are the unmet needs and how are you meeting those unmet needs? And I think a failure is only looking at your product and focusing on, okay, this product, I need to sell it. No, you need to think about the entire patient journey and where can you help make that journey easier or better for that patient. It's not just about them getting the medication, for example. Is there something you can do around the time of diagnosis or when they're experiencing symptoms? Can you help impact how long it takes for them to get the proper diagnosis? Thinking about what happens if their treatment stops working. What are their other options? Can you play a role? So it's a failure to only think about your product or brand and not thinking about it from the patient journey perspective.
And I know you talk a lot about too, Shelley, the fact that making sure patients understand what's going to happen to them if there are.
Yeah, setting expectations for the patients is critical. So as an example, we successfully launched a product recently in Japan where we set the expectations that, hey, in this first cycle, these patients are going to experience nausea and vomiting. And we work with the physician. This is an example where we work with them to think through upfront, what's the best way to manage this? And how can we educate other physicians who want patients to benefit from this treatment to manage it? Because the value is once you get through that first cycle, there's going to be other cycles where you don't see the side effect and you get a longer overall survival for the patient if you can just get them through that first cycle. And making sure then that staff, the healthcare professional staff, they're all aware because they're all involved, the pharmacist, the nurse, the doctor. So they all need to be on board and know what to do for this patient to make the experience better for the patient, but that they explain it to the patient along the way too. So they're not surprised. Oh, I didn't expect to have these side effects. So that is so important in oncology.
Interestingly, I found too that in oncology products, brands, when you do that, sometimes actually your profile gets better, not worse. So a lot of times you'll launch a product and side effects will occur and you'll have to add them to your label. And it was the first time that I was seeing where, okay, the side effects happened, you work together and manage them with the community. And all of a sudden now you're improving your labels and the side effects are getting managed better and the patients aren't having as severe side effects. It's amazing.
And you're also avoiding discontinuation. So I think in our clinical trials, we had about a 20% discontinuation. But in real life, because we're helping manage through it and learning as we go and giving advice, and there's publications being written from top physicians on how to manage this, we have around 5% discontinuation now.
And that's a great example of not just selling your brand, but actually the whole patient journey and everything gets better. And it's good for the brand and the company, but you were focused on the patient.
And I love it. I mean, it's a learning experience. I mean, what you go out with in your launch is going to change, and you got to keep everybody together as a team. And if you're not communicating, something's going to get lost. So that's very exciting. Well, I'm going to now move you to the future. And looking ahead, what excites each of you the most about the next decade?
There's just so much advancement. So I'm here at ASH, the American Society of Hematology, and I'm just amazed at how advanced we've become. Christi, of course, can talk about the CAR T-cell therapy and how that's curing lives. We're not there in some of the cancer areas. However, they look at so many different combinations now, and that can extend overall survival. So instead of thinking of other companies as competitors, you need to think about, can they be your partner? And if you work together, can you have better outcomes for patients than if you just work alone? And then a lot of work is still being done on not just that first line, but second, third, and fourth line, which is great because some of these cancers, patients didn't even live long enough to get beyond a first or second line therapy. So to see this focus that is not just in the first line setting, but so far along the continuum, that tells me patients are living much longer. So, and there's a lot of exciting products, that innovative mechanism of actions coming out too. So this is just a really exciting time to be in oncology.
Yeah, and I think, the use of AI in our industry is just going to help accelerate it even more. I know many people may be worried about AI, but I think if we can actually get the tasks done by AI, and we can use our brains and our caring and our engagement and empathy more so, and put humans where we need them the most, I think AI is really going to help us be more efficient and therefore redirect our resources where it's best needed for patients.
So one of my final questions, and I always hate these because when you ask for one, you immediately think of 5 or 6, and you got to mention one. If every listener changed just one regular practice or habit tomorrow to accelerate cancer cures, what would you be asking them to change?
For me, it's always comes back to the, and maybe people think it's a simple answer now, but I would say every day before you leave your work, what is the one thing you did for a patient today?
That's really good. I can't top that.
I would think you were both
2 things you did for a patient today. Right?
But see, I would have expected. You guys are so aligned as far as caring for the patient.
Yeah, it's funny because I was going to answer with the patient focus. That's why I went first. But yeah,
I know. I said,
she said it so perfectly. I'm like, yeah, I think it would be this.
We don't need 5, just that one thing.
Yeah,
just that one thing. I love it. Well, that's funny. I would not expected anything less from sisters who can get that answer first, so the other one's going to be in a hot spot. Well, thank you, Shelley and Christi, for sharing your insights and for sharing your moving personal stories. This was wonderful. I know this podcast is going to be an inspiration to our listeners, and I have a feeling we're going to have to come back at you again because there are a lot of other questions I had for you, and we have a hard stop today, so we're going to go with that hard stop, but we'll talk again. Thank you. That's it for this episode. I'm Dr. Kirk Shepard. Thanks for listening and for being part of the conversation that's moving oncology forward.